All right, hi folks, and welcome to another Inside Laravel. Today's edition, let's take a look. Over the last few weeks, few months now, I guess, we have gone over a lot of stuff. We covered the request lifecycle, where we started with the index.php in the public directory, where we bootstrapped the app. Went all the way through the HTTP kernel, middleware, routing, etc. From there, we moved on to the service container and configuration. We looked at managers briefly and the scheduler. We looked at queues and jobs, although we did not get to the bus. That is still on my to-do list. I suspect I'm going to end this sort of series with a grab bag of little topics. Couple weeks ago now, we looked at events and listeners as well as the broadcasting and notifications. That was super cool. And then last week, we looked at sessions and error handling. This week, we are going to jump into Eloquent. Before we start, I do want to apologize. I have a bit of a cold, so you may see me frequently switching out the camera or at least muting to just sort of blow my nose or whatever over here. Just bear with me. But yeah, we're gonna jump into Eloquent here. As I have done every single week now, we'll start at the top where we use the thing and sort of dive in from there and see what is happening under the hood. I already do have a couple of models in here. I created one the other day for the session, which we can actually get rid of because that was just for funsies. And then there's the default user model, right? So we'll dig into that. Like we'll just start with the default model, make sure there's nothing crazy happening and nothing that is sort of unexpected. Let's just go into our let's see, like profile controller would definitely be using it. We already have some stuff in here, obviously that we used. And let's not do that. Let's go to just web.php and we will just let's see, dd user all. All right, we'll start there. Let's import that model, and let's see what that even brings up. I don't think I have a registered user, so completely empty array. That makes total sense. Let's see if we have a user factory in here. Create. Let's see if we can create a user. And here we go. So we've got a user that was created. And if you've never looked into a model before, let me make that a bit bigger. What that mainly consists of, the thing that you usually care about, is the attributes property. See here we can see we've got Dr. Montana Casper. Here's their email address. The email was verified with this password. We have a remember token and obviously are created and updated at timestamps. You'll also notice that there's like an original array here. As well as, there's also the changes array, which has nothing in it. We'll take a look at that. And then some other things as well, like whether it's using timestamps, whether it's using unique IDs. I believe this is for UUIDs and ULIDs. We also have, things that were defined on the model that we should know about. So the hidden, the fillable, what's guarded, stuff like that. So, let us play with this a little bit because there's some really cool features in Eloquent that I don't think get used maybe enough, and certainly not to the full extent that they could be. So we'll do, now that we have a user, I'm just going to get rid of, excuse me, get rid of that user all, and let's just pull in our user. So we'll do user first, right? And if I now do something like username equals Davy Shafik, and then dump that, so let's see, $dump user, and refresh. This is where some of those properties will come into play. But what's interesting is there's been no changes yet. So our attributes, this has changed, right? This has been updated. This is that change that I have. Our original stays exactly as it was with Dr. Montana, but our changes array has nothing in it. And let me see here. If we call is dirty, does that return? It does return true. So that is presumably figured out by calculating the changes. Yeah, between the original, which is kind of where. Oh, interesting. Okay. I'm not going to dig right into that right now, but it's calculated on the fly using those original and the attributes properties. And then if we go ahead and save that, user save, and then dump the user again, let's see what happens. So we'll refresh that, and in this case, we can see that the changes have updated. The original is now set to what the persisted state is, and attributes has obviously not been changed again. So original will always have the persisted state. At least that's kind of the goal, anyways. All right, so let's take a look into the actual kind of model methods and stuff. So I think it's important to understand that a lot of the mechanism around Eloquent is, I believe, closer to a facade than it is to like an inherited class. I believe there's a lot of forwarding happening under there, and part of the reason for that is going to be that ultimately the underlying sort of implementation of talking to the database is different depending on which database you want, right? So there's going to be some sort of at least wrapped underlying driver object that talks to individual databases. So let's go ahead and we'll do that user all again, and let's start digging into it. So that does come from the model class, right? And what it's going to do is just run query get. So we're just kind of aliasing here to query and then get. And I believe that, yeah, all of these methods will pretty much just call static query and then do something from there. But what you'll notice is there's a lot of methods like first. I don't believe first is in here. That do not exist on the model itself. Let's take a look at this here. We don't want to see constants, private members, properties. I don't think that's going to matter. So there's a lot of methods here. So things like update, is create in here, for example. Delete is here. Create is not. Right? Which is interesting to me. So where did these come from, right? There's a bunch of attributes that are pulled in here. But I think the most interesting one is going to be forwards calls. And this is, I think, going to be forwarding stuff essentially to the query underneath, right? So let's take a look at, instead of doing user all, let's take a look at the query and what that gives us. So this gives us an eloquent builder. So anytime that you are doing something like a where clause where you want to have a closure so that you can do nested ands and ors, things like that, this is the object that you will pretty much get. Now, there are two builders in Laravel. There's the eloquent builder, and then there's the database builder. And they're quite similar, but not really. And the main difference, I think, is the eloquent builder understands the model, whereas the database builder just builds SQL. Those are the two differences there. So inside of the Eloquent builder is a query builder, right? So this does exist, and this is kind of used under the hood by the Eloquent builder. We can see here that we have a connection, which is using the MySQL connection, the grammar. And so what's interesting about this is by disassociating the connection and the grammar, we can have like a MariaDB specific grammar, for example, even though it's using MySQL connection, because those are functionally compatible, right? I'm not 100% sure what the processor is, so we can take a look at that. What is the full path there? You're not going to show me? That's not a thing? Okay. We have bindings. I'm not really sure what those are for. Obviously, this would be kind of all of the pieces of a select query. So I'm not sure if that changes for an update or a delete, something like that. We can see the table that it's pulling from. This would be where any joins or where clauses or groups or etc. are having. And these, I think, will pair, right? So where, group by, groups, having, etc., right? This is also where limits are happening. Let's see, we've got operators. So this is, I think, the translation table between sort of, because you can use PHP type operators in every driver, even if the database underneath doesn't support it. And then this is whether or not it's using write PDO. I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure if it's when you have read write connections, if it's saying this particular query is going out specifically on the write connection, or if it's saying use PDO for writing. So we can take a look at that. Let's see here. These are methods that are going to be passed through to something, either the query builder directly, or maybe the grammar or something like that. So let's dig a little bit further. So this is our query. And as I said, most queries kind of get built on top of this. So we can run to raw SQL, and we can see this is just select star from users. I don't think there's any like craziness there. Let's add like a where clause. Where name Davy Shafik, right? And we can see that just gets built out. So let's dive into this some more. So this is a very simple query. Oopsie. I keep hitting Command W, which obviously just closes the tab. So what does the where clause do, right? So this is one of those sort of variadic type-ish functions where they figure out what the, like if you don't specify an operator, then it's just equals, right? So that's going to need to happen in here. Let's see. Yeah, it just kind of gets forwarded to the where clause. Where did this builder come from? Oh, right. This is the query, right? This is where we got the query. Where is where again? Here. Um, we're going to go into this where, because I believe it's going to be less complicated. Um, if column is a condition expression. Okay, so I'm actually pretty confident that this will ultimately end up calling where. Um, it does not. That's interesting. My expectation there was that because this can take a condition expression, that it would build the condition expression and then call that. But that's fine. We'll move on from here. Um, what I want to see is where it actually like does the query stuff. So is it going to build out a sort of generic query structure that then gets built when you call, say, to raw SQL, or is it going to do it as it goes along? That's kind of what I'm looking for here. So let's see here. Where null. Yeah, it's just building this sort of tree of things, right? So where's is an array. Oops. Again, I hit that. Command W. So it's just going to create an object of things, which means we go back to here and we just dump the query. We should see, I believe in here. Yeah, here's our where clause right there, right? Now, what's interesting is it's just like 0 is like it's just the thing. So I wonder if I change this to not equals, what does that look like? See, now it's a whole array. So this can get quite complicated here. What happens then if we go where? Oops. And I know this is an invalid query, but I just kind of want to have two where clauses that make sense in here. Query where's. Oh, so once an array is in there's now always an array. Is that what's going to happen? Interesting. I wonder why the difference there. Because again, if we go back to here. Oh, I'm looking at the bindings, right? That's why. Okay. These are the value bindings. This is the wheres. Sorry, I got confused there. So let me go back to this here. So bindings should just still be, yeah, just two values. And then the wheres here are always like this. Cool. So to raw SQL. So this presumably is where the query is constructed. And I think what's interesting here is there used to be, like, to raw SQL is not that new, right? So if we just do to SQL, which has existed forever, we end up with these placeholders. And Laravel uses anonymous placeholders with the question marks rather than named placeholders, which I always prefer named placeholders. And seeing as we know, kind of, like, this could be used as the placeholder, although they would have to kind of keep track and add numbers to it to, if they, like in this case where I've got two of them, where they're the same column, it would have to be like name 1, name 2. But to raw SQL does the substitution. So in reality, what should be happening, depending on whether or not you're using emulated prepares in PDO, what should be happening is the query and the values that go in with the query with placeholders and the values for those placeholders should be sent separately to the database, and the database is responsible for kind of replacing those placeholders with the values. And And I think the main reason you would do that is that the database fully understands the grammar, and won't screw up with double quotes and multiple quotes nested and stuff like that, right? Plus, you can reuse. So the query plan is done on the query with the placeholders, and then you only have to do that once, which is why when you are in a loop, you want to create a prepared query first and then execute it many times. It will, ideally, will avoid doing the sort of parsing AST query plan and all that stuff multiple times, or at least some portion of that. So I believe that when Laravel, at least for the drivers to support it, when Laravel sends the actual query to the database, it's not using the same mechanism that 2 raw SQL is going to use. But I don't think it should make a problem. Like, I don't think it's an issue, but it is something to understand that is happening. So, yeah, so this is going to use the grammar, right? So substitute bindings into raw SQL. So it'll actually do the 2SQL that we just did, and then prepare the bindings. So we can dig into that and then substitute them. So this get bindings is going to be looking at where are we at here? I'm just going to add another. So it's going to be looking at the bindings, right? And then it's going to, and we can see that here. This is flattening the bindings. And then it's going to prepare those. So what does that look like? So now we're looking at something that's using an interface, right? So this is actually on the connection. So let's take a look into. Interesting. There's only one of these? Okay, yeah, this is just one concrete implementation. So here's our prepare bindings. It will get the grammar. So that is going to be, whatever database you're using, MySQL, etc. And then apparently will format stuff. So it doesn't do a lot of things here, does it, right? It checks to see if it's a date time. If so, it will format it into their datetime format. If it's a Boolean, then it will turn it into an int. And that is it. So very simple bindings here. And then let's go back to here. It will substitute them. So let's see here. So bindings, it will array map them. And it will escape. Let's see what that does real quick. Where, okay. Okay, so it is possible that this will fail with certain grammars, right? This looks like it would fail if the connection wasn't established. I'm not sure this error message is great, but that's fine. So what does escape look like? Okay, escape a value for safe SQL embedding. So nulls just return the string null. If it's binary, then it has a whole nother method that may or may not support binary. There must be other implementations of this connection. Let's just see here. There we go. That's what I expected. Okay. And as you can see, actually, there is a MySQL and a MariaDB connection. So let's go into, I think the one most people, let's go into SQLite, actually, because it's probably the simplest. So that actually means, sorry, if we go back to escape, and then escape binary, this should be implemented. Okay, so here's SQLites. It does a bin to hex. Okay, and then just prefixes with X and quotes it. Yeah. Um, let's see. Let's actually see what another one looks like, right? So maybe MySQL is different. I think that I can, yeah, do that. Perfect. So this is MySQL. It's doing exactly the same thing. PostgreSQL, different, right? So what this one's doing is doing the bin to hex, but it's not quoted. Or rather, it is, but it's around the entire string. Is that slightly different? Yeah, it is around the entire string, including the prefix, which is now slash. Um, and then it's got a type coercion here, right? So this byte A. Um, okay, so that's escape binary. And then if it's an int or a float, it turns it into a string. Okay. Wonder if there's any concern about losslessness there. Booleans, I'm going to assume then that this. Uh, oh, interesting. Okay, that is interesting to me. So um, it turns it into a string, which is weird because we saw earlier that there was the changes to integers. Um, but this will turn it into string 1 or 0. And then the only outlier there is Postgres, it looks like. Because if I click here, it only goes to Postgres. It's the only one that exists, which uses the strings true and false. So it actually has constants, whatever you want to call them, keywords for true and false as opposed to just 0 and 1. Or 1 and 0, I should say. If it's an array... Oh, okay. So, hang on. This isn't overridden anywhere. Where was it being called? Interesting. So does that mean? And maybe the issue is that it shouldn't be possible, but yeah, let's do something like that. Oh, that doesn't even create a valid query. What does that even do? Let's try adding the operator in here so it's much clearer what those things are. No, I don't think that we can ever get an array into there. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't look like we can even ever get an array into there, so that's probably okay. Um, my expectation is that this might have been where JSON stuff comes into play, but actually that's going to be in casting, so yeah, that's fine. Um, maybe what's also interesting is we're not seeing any casting yet. That happens, I believe, when actually putting data into the object or pulling it out. So by the time we get to queries and stuff, it's too late. Well, hang on. Does that mean we cannot cast? You can't. So let's say, for example, you're doing an update, and one of your columns is a money object. This is the one I'm most familiar with, right? So when you pull it from the database, it's going to be hopefully an integer of cents that gets turned into a money object using the casting. And when you access that property, you get a money object out of it. However, when you set that value, And when it is when you call the save method, it's going to be transformed back into an integer of cents, right? So what there's no way to use the money object is kind of where I'm getting at in the in a query, right? Because there is no escape. There's no casting happening here. That actually is interesting to me, and I would love to know if it was possible to implement that. And I wonder if there is. No, there's nothing. There's no sort of. This would live, in my opinion. It has to live in the Eloquent query builder as opposed to the query builder. Because the Eloquent one is the one that has like knowledge of the models, right? If we look at the query here, this query, it has no knowledge of the models, and we're kind of in here when we're doing all of these things, like this where calls query where, right? So it's going to be this query here, which is this why are you not expanding? It's very frustrating. Which is the query builder, is this query right here, right? So there's no like transformation happening, and it would have to be in these methods. So where, first where, all of these methods where we would have casting. That's a little frustrating, if I'm being honest. Like, I would love to be able to construct, because the reason that you would use like a money object, for example, is because you are doing money operations and you want to keep them as a value object at all times. And yes, ultimately, to do the query, you have to turn it into a string or an integer or something like that. You can't obviously use the object itself, but up until that moment, I would want it to be an object. I would want to know that, like, I'm not assigning it somewhere else and then accidentally overriding it and not realizing stuff like that, right? I would just want to pass the object into the where. Yeah, okay. Could be an interesting feature for someone to build. All right, so sorry, we were looking into this right here. So otherwise, so if it's not null, it's not binary, it's not an integer or float, it's not Boolean, it's not an array, then it sort of assumes it's a string. And if it contains the null byte, can't be escaped. It needs to be escaped using binary. This checks for invalid UTF-8 sequences. Everything's using UTF-8 these days. I mean, I don't hate it. And then it will escape the string. So let's take a look at that. We'll get the read PDO connection, and then it will quote it. So this is actually using the internal PDO feature. So if we go to php.net/PDO, here's the quote function, right? So it is, in theory, possible to do safe queries without doing any prepared queries. But why? Is all I will say. So yeah. Ultimately that's what's going to happen then. So all of the, I guess, one thing to recognize then is that Eloquent is inherently tied to PDO. I don't think it has to be because we have the connection interface, but all of the internal drivers are using PDO as far as I know. But if you wanted to build, I'm not sure that you could, but if you could build a grammar for, excuse me, for example, for a graph database, like Neo4j or something, you could, in theory, do that. And of course, PDO doesn't support Neo4j, so it would be interesting to kind of see if that was possible. Again, like Eloquent is definitely meant for, and the query builder and like all of the database stuff in Laravel is absolutely meant for relational databases and SQL based relational databases, not a graph database, which is vastly different. It doesn't use SQL. It does not use relationships in the same way. Although there are definitely, like, the whole point of a graph database is the relationships, right? Okay, so we have looked into to raw SQL. Let's just jump back to that. And we're still here. So we've escaped all of the bindings. And then we're going to start building up the query, I presume. And then we literally go through character by character. Because single quotes can be escaped as two single quotes according to the SQL standard. While MySQL uses backslash quote, Postgres has operators like question mark pipe that must get encoded in PHP like question mark pipe. Is that really true? We should skip over the escaped characters here. Okay. So, we're looking for escape sequences and just sort of building the query up character by character. Okay. And here's where the actual thing happens. What's interesting to me, so if it's a question mark and it's not a string literal, then it's going to try to array shift the bindings, and if it can't, it will just retain the question mark, which means that they're guarding against the possibility that you have, interesting. I wonder if you use the DB raw stuff. I don't know if that's where the string literal comes into play. But assuming that it doesn't, you can, I guess, anywhere you could specify your own like piece of the query and put a placeholder in place. If you don't also add a binding, that's where this is going to come into play. And yeah, that's how the raw query is built up. Now, the question that we had, or that I had earlier, was, does executing the query actually use this, or does it use the PDO underlying prepared queries, right? So I guess to figure that out, what we need to do then is look at like get, right? So we apply scopes, which one of my favorite features in Laravel is actually scopes. So we're in the Eloquent builder right now. If count models, get models, if we actually found models, we will also eager load any relationships that have been specified. Sorry, when did we actually run the query? I don't believe that we have. Unless it's here. It is. Here's the query. So I just want to go back through that actually, because I think that's interesting. So this is where the query actually gets executed. So if it'll call builder get models. So at this stage of the game, we're getting hydrated models out. This is not calling the database. That's one level deeper. And then obviously if there are models, then it will eager load excuse me, the relationships for all of those. So yeah, let's dig back into this. So here's the hydrate. I want to dig into that. I'm honestly not sure how to get to it. So we'll have to figure that out. All right, so what we want to look at then is, I'm not sure if it's going to be the get or the all. Presumably it must be all. Let's do get. Oh, this is where the processor comes in. I'm assuming this is for processing the results. And that might be doing stuff like typecasting from, whatever the database gives back to whatever is expected in the PHP. Like numbers come through as integers, etc. Rather than all just being strings, which used to be the default everywhere in every driver. So let's see. It calls toSQL. That's what I wanted to know. And then passes in the bindings, right? This is what I was expecting. So it takes in the query, the bindings. If we're not pretending. Yeah, so it is doing prepared queries then. So this is presumably, yeah, that's the underlying PDO prepare. And then, so you're going to see this like get PDO for select and stuff, get PDO for write. This is going to be where it should, once I think you can set it up. I can't remember if it's a default, but you absolutely, I'm sure, can set it as a thing, which is use write after write. Use the write connection after you've made a change. So rather than doing the split where it reads from the secondary servers, the replicas, and it writes to the primary, you can have it so to avoid latency issues, that it will start to use the write, the primary, after it does a write, rather than pulling from the latency restricted replicas. Okay, so let's go back to here. I want to look into this processor stuff a bit. So this is running the query, just to, like, this is where the actual query is run. And then we process it. So, yeah, each database then has its own processor. Let's take a look at SQLite again. So it turns what would have been an array into an object. I'm not sure what type is. I wonder if that's part of the SQLite stuff. Then it will figure out collation. This looks like it's doing, it is. It's figuring out the columns for each, for the table. Why are we? doing that. Oh, process select. I went to the processor. That's why. Um, so yeah, none of these look to be overridden except like types, columns, indexes, etc., which is around the schema, except for process insert get ID. Which is apparently having to do a SQL query. Am I incorrect there? Oh, the SQL is probably. This is a method on the query builder that's direct. Okay. Oops. So yeah, in Postgres, we'd be using sequences for, or traditionally that is changing, I believe. So yeah, they don't have auto incrementing columns like MySQL does. Interesting. It can be an object, and if not, it's assumed to be an array. Okay. Um, if it's numeric, return it as directly as an int. If not, it's a string. So ULIDs and UUIDs. Okay. Uh, so we've called the processor, which is just going to return the results because nothing overrides that. And then we collect them all. Okay. Um, and then that returns a closure, not closure, a collection. Sorry, right? So the items is a collection, which means that ultimately the all here is just returning the items array. Is this called anywhere else? Presumably a lot of places. Yeah. Okay. And some of them are not calling all. I was just wondering, like, why turn it into a collection if you're just gonna pull it straight out of it, anyways. But it's not always doing that. Okay. So that answers that question. So it is absolutely using the underlying PDO, which may be emulated, prepared queries rather than using its get raw SQL. So yeah, just minor potential for gotcha, but it seems like they're pretty solid. So I do want to look into the. I do want to look into this hydrate. So what is model? It should be the name of the model, right? Yeah. So in theory, then we should be able to go to our user model, and let's take a look at this. Yeah, there's no hydrate here. So where does that come from? Hydrate. Well, here's a hydrate. Where do we... Hold on, I want to go back to... The model being queried. So that is a string? T model. It's supposed to be an object. And And so, yeah, the reason why it's not letting me command click into that is because it does not exist on the model. Yes, I want to search for all accessors of that. See, this one exists. It's in the trait that's, inherited by or not inherited, but added to the model. Interesting. So this must be going through forwards calls. How it knows what to forward to, we haven't figured that out yet. But let's take a look at our hydrate model, or hydrate then. I actually kind of want to see. Let's dig into it, and then we'll figure out how it gets called. So it's going to create a new model instance, and set the connection on it to the correct connection, presumably. New instance. So is this okay? So that means that model that method does exist, which means that I can do user first new instance, and that'll just give me an empty. Yeah. Okay. Not sure why it's not static, but I'm sure there's a reason. So we were in. Sorry, where were we? Here. Here? Here. Okay. So we create a new model instance, and then we create a collection. Why are we creating an instance just to go ahead and then create more instances? That seems a little weird. Is this really necessary? I guess we don't necessarily have an instance at all. And because this is not static, we have to create an instance somehow. But then we're going to just never actually use it. It's being used as a thing on which we can call models, but we never actually return this instance as a model. So it's not part of the query results. So we're looking at new from builder, where we're going to call new instance. It exists is true, so that means we're getting values from the database. Actually, this one then should be, exists false. Set the raw attributes. So this is going to. So as I said before, the original is always what's persisted to the database. And this is how it's setting the attributes column underlying. This is how the underlying Eloquent stuff does it. And then if sync is true, it will call sync original, which is just going to set original to get attributes, right? Which technically means, and this is, I guess, the caveat of I said that. Nope. First, I had said that original would always be the persisted data, but that isn't true. If we just pull this out to a model and then do model name equals testing, and then we do model sync original. This does not persist it to the database, but you can see here, and our changes array does not have anything in it. I wonder if it is dirty though. Shouldn't be. Yeah. So I guess if you ever want to be in a scenario where you want to stealthily make changes so that something else later that depends on whether or not something is dirty, you can do that by syncing the original. Not sure why you would want to, but yeah, it is what it is. All right, so let's go back to where we were. So we were looking at set raw attributes here, right? Okay, cool. We set the connection to the connection name if it's not passed in explicitly. And then it fires the retrieved event and then returns the original model. I do need to go back a little bit further now, don't I? I don't even remember how we got here. Oh, we were in hydrate. That's how we got there. That's right. I didn't get to it through the code, did I? Yeah, so this is going to create an array and create a new collection. And then this is, I don't think it's being called. Yeah, we can't see it where it was being called in the query builder. As I said, it must be forwarded to it. And that was the next thing we were going to do, right? Is we were going to, I'm going to put an xdebug in here. And then we're going to refresh and see how this gets called. All right, so we're in here. All right, so here. So we're doing this first call, which calls builder first, which we're just in. So take one, get first. Not really sure why there's two of those, like why it has take one and first. I guess this is going to... This is going to create a collection still. So like this is going to be like a limit one. And then it'll return a collection of one record. And then first will return the right thing. And we can verify that. Will it tell me? Will it give it to me? No. I was hoping that would be a value. Okay. So we're going to call get models. And here we are with this model, which is in fact, we should be able to see a user model. And then we go into call, which ultimately forwards the calls to. And so let's see, what is this? So the trait pulls in the forward calls to. Yeah, that's the forwards calls. but the call itself is defined in the Eloquent model. And then it... If it's increment, decrement, increment quietly, and decrement quietly, then it's just... How is it? How is that not an infinite loop? I want to look into that a little bit. Anyways, results, relationships. If it starts with through, so some magic method stuff happening there. Otherwise, it forwards the call, which is what we figured was happening. And that's ultimately how we get to hydrate on the Eloquent builder. Sorry, I didn't quite get everything I wanted to there. So this is where the new query comes in. And then the method is, what is it? Hydrate. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay. So the next thing I do want to look into then, so we've looked at how queries get constructed in terms of adding to the underlying query builder, how it actually gets sent to the database server using the raw PDO stuff rather than the get raw SQL. The other thing I do want to look into, though, is this attributes, originals, and changes stuff. Because I said I think it's really powerful and it's really quite cool. So I guess let's first call. I'll just toss an xdebug in here. Model is dirty, and this should be false. Let me wrap that in a DD. And sorry, let me just validate that like this does sane stuff. Oh, whoops. Okay. So yeah, as expected, false. How does it figure that out? Let's find out. So we'll put in the xdebug break. Skip that one, and we're going to go into the isDirty call. So it's going to, excuse me, call has changes. It's going to call get dirty. Which is just going to loop through all of the attributes and then see if they're equivalent. So I'm guessing there's some, because of casting or whatever, there may be, one is a string versus one is an integer. So it's just trying to figure out if they're good enough. There's some casting and stuff happening here. Okay. Okay, sorry, we're in isDirty. And then so what does it take as arguments? Has changes. So it takes the changes and then it also takes the attributes. Those are the attributes that we are checking to see if they have changed. Because you can pass an argument in. Okay. So this is generic, right? So it's whether or not it has any changes at all. And then the has changes will verify if it's the ones that you care about. And you can either pass in an array or it's variadic. Using old style func_get_args variadic. I'd love to see a lot of these func_get_args get moved to real variadics, and I suspect that that's a sort of legacy holdover from older Laravel days. I wonder if there's a rector that can do that everywhere very simply. All right, so we're going to jump into this. We'll now see that we're never going to hit this line. So if I just hit play here, we just skip straight down to here. So dirty is an empty array, which is to be expected. And then we go into the hash changes. We didn't pass in any attributes. So basically it's saying if count is more than 0 of changes, which is again an empty array, then it will return true. And if not, then it will return false. And then we're into DD. We don't want to debug DD. So I guess kind of interesting there then is if we want to do a specific column. So let's just say is dirty name, right? It's going to do a little bit more work. So again, nothing has changed, right? Dirty is still empty. But because attributes is no longer empty, it's going to come down to here, which means that there's an optimization that can actually be put into place here, which is if empty $changes, return false. Like there's no reason for this not to be in here. I might commit that, and in fact, it should just be here. So yeah, otherwise, we're going to go into this whole thing of wrapping the attributes into an array and then checking to see if any of them exist. So, we're having to call this wrap. We're having to do this array key exists, which does mean that if we have a very long list of dirty attributes, or like that we're looking for, we're going to have a whole bunch of array key exists lookup for an array that's empty, which is why this actually becomes more important. So we're gonna leave that in there. I'm gonna submit a PR for that. Almost every one of these streams has come up with a small PR, so I find that fun and interesting. So ultimately it's going to wrap the list of attributes, which is just name. So that means that we can pass in the variadic or not. And then it will check to see if the name, so in this case name, exists in changes and return true. Otherwise, we return false, right? Which is expected. So this is with no changes whatsoever. The reason it hit return true there is because I'd added the extra lines. So let's go ahead and make a change. Like let's look at what that looks like. So if I do model name equals, let's just use David instead of Davey, and we'll refresh. And now let's go into dirty. And we'll go into hash changes. So now we're inside here, and we should hit line 2124 now, right? There we go. So because those two values are not the same between the attributes and the original, it is going to say that this key is dirty. And so now we're into hash changes. Our changes array has the name is set and what that value is. Because attributes is not empty, it's going to skip that optimization and going to go through this loop again. So in this case, we are looking for the attribute name, and it does exist in changes as a key. So that's going to return true. So that is figured out every time, right? Not ideal. I would like to memoize, I think, the get changes call. Then you have to invalidate that if there are more changes, which would be frustrating. So I guess I get it. Of course you can do multiple checks at once. Like we already just talked about that, how this here could be any number of things, right? So I don't know what other keys there even are on this table. Username, email, right? So yeah. Okay. So with that in mind, then that's how is dirty works. And then there's the get original. There we go. So if you're not familiar with this, what this will do is it will get from the original array, right? We've already determined. Sorry, we'll take a look at the model again. Sorry, let's just go through that. So here's the originals. This is what's persisted in the database, and this is what is currently in the object and will persist. Get original will just pull from the original array. Now there was also is there anything around changes? Get changes, right? So this should return an empty array at this point. And the reason for that is we haven't persisted it. And so I'd love to see yeah. So where does this get called? Yeah, perform update. Perfect. So there's going to be some juggling happening here, right? So when you pull a model from the database, original, and I'm gonna just go over here. Not here. I actually want to. There we go. Oh, I guess it was right below, but that's fine. So when you pull from the database, attributes and original are going to be identical. And then if you make a change to a property, that is going to be reflected in attributes. And original will not change until you persist to the database. So you actually call save. And what will happen is Laravel will do a couple of things. It will, first of all, use the delta between these two to populate the changes array. And that way we can tell after the fact what actually changed. And then it will sync it to the database, and then we'll copy our attributes to original. And they're now both the same. Excuse me, again. And we can see that happening in here. Is it this one? Yeah. So perform update. So it fires the event and bails out. If it's using the timestamps, it will update those. And then it will do get dirty for update. If you think about an update request, it's going to be update table set column equals new value, other column equals other new value, where some key matches, right? So that's why this actually is really interesting. Is the get dirty for update is going to use these to figure out exactly what values need to be set. It could just set all of the table, like all the columns to the whatever values are in the object right now, rather than figuring out the delta. That's also viable. But if you have, some things that are larger, let's say that you're storing small images in the database or JSON blobs or something like that, this just minimizes wire transfer and is kind of trading that off for CPU usage, right? So let's take a look at get dirty for update. It just calls get dirty, which does not surprise me. So we've already looked at that, and that basically does this original is equivalent stuff, right? So let's go back to then here. So if there are no changes, it won't do anything. So I think that's a nice optimization there. So if you haven't actually so if, for example, a user submits a form and leaves all the values the same as they were, you could still call update and it wouldn't really do much. It's still going to be it's not gonna have the database do anything, is what I mean. It's still going to have to go through figuring out are any of these changed, which for a large table could be a lot of resources, but ultimately it will save on the database query, which is nice. Okay, so set keys for the save query. Oh, so this is where it's going to set the where ID equals. So we got key name. This is going to, by default, will return ID, and then this will give you the key. And the reason we have these columns is so that you can customize the key name. That is a thing that you can do. So if you didn't want to use ID or it was capital I, lowercase d, whatever. I know some teams use like the user table will have user ID as its primary key. The same as it would be in any other table where it was related to, right? So they don't just use ID on its own. So absolutely have seen that, totally valid. Not standard, default Laravel, but like obviously legacy is a thing, and best practices for your team are a thing. Okay, so sorry, let's get back to here. Then it calls update and sync changes. So where is it going to be setting? Oh, sync changes, right? So we did say this. So it's calling get dirty. Where does it then set attributes to original to attributes? That's what I'm not seeing. I don't know if there's a default event. This is protected, so let's see. Is it being called somewhere else? Sync original, right here. Okay, so that's where that happens. So if it exists, it's going to do an update. Otherwise, it will do an insert, and regardless, it's going to do the finish save, which is going to call the saved event. Touch the owners, which I'm not sure what that is. Is that the new feature that got added in the release a few months ago? Oh, okay. Oh. So it's going to update the timestamp on all of the parent records that point to this record. That could be a lot of queries if you're not careful. I don't think it's a huge deal, but just something to consider. But yeah, ultimately, then it will sync the original, right? So again, let's do this now. Let's run this change. We're going to run save. And we'll refresh, and we'll be right here in here. So we'll go into save. Create the new model query. Fire the event. And then because it does exist, so this exists is true, which it's going to set exists on anything it pulls from the database. That's basically what's happening. It will see if it's dirty, which we know what that looks like. So it's going to call the hash changes, get dirty, all that stuff, right? So it is going to return true because name updated, and hash changes. We know what this is going to do. And then it's going to call perform update. If it's using the timestamps, then it updates the timestamps. I'm curious about this. Does it Oh, you can change the name of the column for updated at even. Okay. Does it just set the attribute, or does it set something else? I assume it's going to set the attribute. Oh, did I must have missed that. Why are we calling this? Oh, it checks to see if it's already been updated. That's actually pretty cool. So if you update it yourself manually, then it will not change it. So set updated at, and yeah, it literally just sets the property. So it's going to go through all of the casting and everything else that happens with setting a property. That was my question actually, is whether it was just going to dump it into the attributes array or if it was going to set it as a property. And then basically the same thing for the created at, right? Which it should only update, sorry, if it's not new. I actually want to just double check that again. Yeah, if it doesn't exist, then it will also set the created at. Okay, so going back to here, get dirty for update. We looked at that. That just returns dirty. Oh, this is going to be happening all the time, isn't it? Okay. If dirty is more than 0. So this is that optimization, which it is. And I wonder if that's always going to be the case if you have timestamps. Oh, where did we end up here? Oh, yep, that's right. Sorry, update timestamps. Yeah, so if you have timestamps turned on, that optimization then of here where it doesn't do anything is just going to essentially be the same as touch. Where we'll just update the updated app. Okay, so we're going to set the keys for the save query. We talked about this. So what this is going to do is essentially get ID, so the primary key value, which is it going to show me? Yeah, is ID. And then it'll get the key value. So it'll look in the original array, which makes sense. That's what's persisted to the database. What is... So if it's null, then it'll call get key. Get attribute. How is that not the same thing? Oh, okay. Actually, I think I do see why that is. So... Oh, okay. That is actually really interesting. So, sorry, if we go back to here, if this were not a pulled from the database record, so we did something like dollar $model equals user create, user make. Don't want to save it, and then do dollar $model ID equals 1, which is presumably my key. And then, whatever else, right? Name equals. And then we save it. It will save it to this one, even though it does not exist. Well, actually, can we do exists? Can we set that? So I just want to make sure there's no method for it. So if we did this, like we could manually force it to do that because this would not be in the original array because it didn't come from the database. So yeah, just a thing. Not sure why that's useful, but that is what is happening there. Okay, so we're going to move on from get keys for the query, and it's going to set that where. So we can see ID equals 1, right? That's what we expect. Set keys for the query. So we're back to our update. Sorry, how did we get... Oh, and then it chains on update. Okay. So yeah, let's add updated at column. What's happening there? I'm gonna get scopes. If the model does not use timestamps, or it's null, return. Didn't we already do the updated at? Like I'm not really sure what is happening there. Oh wait, maybe I do know what's happening there. No, I don't. I thought it was you see this is prefixed with the schema. I thought maybe it was happening there, but I mean it is. But obviously that's doing much more than qualifying it. Okay. Compile update. Right. So this is where we're actually going to take the name and the user's updated at and create the SQL. So let's take a look at that. Update user set name equals question mark. Users dot updated at equals question mark, where ID equals question mark. I don't think there's anything super unexpected there. And then, of course, we're going to go into the bindings and all that stuff. And this is going to be the same as doing the select. Then we call sync changes. So that is where the changes array gets set. And so what that will look like, presumably, this changes here. We can see that the name and updated at were changed. That is absolutely as expected. And then it'll fire the updated event. And then we're going to go down to here. So we're back in the save method. And we're going to call finish save. So I guess only if it's successful. So we fire the saved event. We check to see if it's dirty. What will that return? Oh, right, because we haven't synced the originals yet. So yes, it's still going to see it as dirty at this point. And it will touch the owners, and now it will finally sync the original. So at this point, and we looked at this, it's just original equals get attributes. Once this happens, this get dirty, or is dirty, sorry, should now return false. Totally expected. Cool. So yeah, that is everything that is happening there. Now I'm curious, now that we have updated it. So the only things that changed were the name and the updated at. And it's giving me the new values. Okay. So at this point, there's no way to get the old values out of it. I think given that these values are obviously in here, like it's the actual current value for both of these, this should have the original value in it. All right, I want to run that again. And the main reason I want it again is I just want to see if what happens with the updated at timestamp, because now it is that value. So let's just run it. And yeah, it doesn't update the updated at if it's the only thing being updated. That's what touch will do. So yeah, if I go to here and call $model touch, I don't think I have to call save. we can see now that just the updated at was changed. Again, I would very much like to have like a previous in here. Why you would want that, I don't know. Honestly, I don't generally have like a use case for it. The main value between like having attributes in original and being able to get changes and stuff. Sorry, not get changes, but get the dirty stuff. The main reason that those exist is so that you can kind of see prior to committing what changes are. Which means that you could, I don't know, present a confirmation screen or something like that easily by drawing on those things. And then after the fact, having the changes means that you can, show what actually did change to the user, something like that, or track it, right? Obviously, if you have like audit logs or something like that where you want to track those things, that's where changes is for. But what is absolutely missing, that if you want an audit log where you can say this changed from this to this, does not seem like you can do that. Let's just 100% confirm that. I'm going to change this back. Obviously, we'll get rid of that and flip that out. So yeah, let's. Ooh. Yeah, you can't get back to that original value anymore. Okay. Which means that really, that's a little frustrating. The only way then, and I wonder if Spady's activity log suffers from this potential problem, which is the only way to get the difference of changes is prior to persisting to the table. Which means that if that persisting fails, then you've now logged a change that did not happen. So probably what if they're not victim to that, they have to pull the changes prior to persist, and then add to the activity log. So you would be looking at like a saving event that persists the diff, and then a saved event that actually persists the changes to the database, to the activity log. Okay, so that's cool. Like I said, one of my favorite features, just that it exists. I think it's really cool. I think it's done really well. Yeah, really like that. All right, so let's see we're about an hour and 30 minutes in. We have about half an hour left. So the last thing that the major thing that I wanted to look into was migration. So I'm going to go hop over to that. And let's just make sure. So we looked at schema drivers and the fact that they exist and how they kind of get there. We looked at the query builder. We did not look at relationships. I think that might be worthwhile going into. How do we go into it? What is that? What do we need to do? So, well, let's go into our user and create a relationship to something. I kind of wish I hadn't deleted that session table now, or session thing. All right, let's just create a new model then. So code Laravel. I'm just going to do it here because I believe books. Fine. Book. Sorry. Has an ID field, string, name, right? That's all it's going to be. Oh, and then a relationship. So user ID. Okay. Sure. Okay. So here is our migration, creates a thing. Here's our model, belongs to user, and here is our factory. That looks reasonable enough. Let's go ahead and run the migrations. So sale artisan migrate. There's our books table. And of course, we're just doing a one-to-one relationship here currently. So, oops. In our user model, did it update that? It did not. Okay. I guess this is actually is one to many. Pub F books has many. Return this has many books. Book class. Okay. I think that's what we need. Let's go ahead. I'm just going to sale artisan tinker app models book factory count 4 user first count 5 create. Okay. So now we should be able to do user first books, and there's all of our 5 books. Cool. These are obviously all biographies. All right, so now that we have that established, how do we do this? What is this actually doing, right? So let's go back to web.php and let's do this. So we're gonna get rid of that for now, and we're gonna do user first books. So here's our collection. Here's each of our 5 books. These are models, so we know what these look like now. Let's instead of calling it as a property, we know that when we call it as an object, as a method, that allows us to modify the query, right? And it's doing that by returning a has many relation with this is an Eloquent builder. There we go. And then this is the query builder. So that is kind of how we are able to modify the query, because this represents sort of this wrapped query. We can see that the parent is presumably the current model, and this is an instance of book, but is not a specific book, presumably. The foreign key is books.userid, which is determined when this is called. I would love to show you how that works. So actually it's in here. Okay. Let's go back to our book method. Excuse me. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll refresh. So we're inside of the books method, and let's go into the has many. Related is just the book class name. We haven't specified any keys. So it's going to create an instance of the book. So that's, I'm sure we can, creating create a new model instance. Oh, here we go. New class. That's what I was looking for. So yeah, it creates an instance of that, and then passes in the connection name, whatever. And then it tries to figure out the foreign key, right? So if foreign key is set, obviously it just uses that. Otherwise, it's going to call get foreign key, which will call class base name this. How is that a thing? Because we're in has many, which is inherited. So this is the user. Cool. Okay. So it gets the class base name, so it's going to get user, and it's going to underscore it with get key name, which is the primary key on the user model in this case. And then it's going to snake case it, right? So just to kind of underscore that, get key name is ID, right? That's what we would expect. And then it's going to get the local key. So it's either going to be what's passed in or it's going to be get key name. So it's just going to get the primary key. Oh, right. Yes. Okay. This user, I was thinking it was users.id. My bad. So yes, the foreign key is obviously, we know the convention is it is the related table's name, no plural, underscore ID. And then obviously the local key is the current key in the current table that matches that. So user ID and ID are a pair. Then it creates a new has many query. I would like to dig into that a little bit. So it creates a new query, sets up the scopes, gets the table name, which is either based on the class base name or it's explicitly defined. So that would be users in this case. So let's see what we got in here. We got a query object, which is an Eloquent builder. We got the parent, which is the user. We got our foreign key, which has now been properly qualified. And then we've got our local key. When did it get qualified? Right here. There is a method for qualifying. I'm not sure why it's doing this get table. I want to come back to that, and I'll need to be back up here to do it, I think, because it's on instance. So then it returns a new has many, which is the object that we were actually looking at, right? So which wraps that query builder, etc. So that's basically the long and short of it, right there, is how that gets created. So we're just creating this. We're not doing anything with it. We're not running a query. Let's take a look into our query builder just to kind of see what's happening here. We've already got a where 0 equals 1. Oh, so sorry, where 1. So what is that? Where's the wheres? This presumably is going to be the user ID. Right. Okay, that's a not null. So, yeah. So the constraint on that join ultimately it's going to be a join is already set. What's interesting is there's no join here. What is this? Hang on, sorry. This is the book. Which makes sense. It isn't a join. This is where so sorry, if we now go back to web.php, we should be able to call get raw SQL on here. Nope. Get query. Yeah. And then get raw SQL. To raw SQL, that's why. To raw SQL. There we go. We should be able to see that it's not a joined query, right? This is where the inefficiencies, I think, of an ORM come into play. Um, if you were writing raw queries from scratch, not using an ORM or any kind of database access layer, you would do a join and pull the user and the books at the same time. And if I'm not mistaken, while you can't do that, so if we do like a user with books first, I don't believe that this uses a join either. Can I call query here? No. To raw SQL? Yeah, it's just select star from users. And then it's going to additionally call books. I'm going to call the books method. This is the method name, right? It's not the relationship. It is the method name. This can be absolutely anything. It has no relation to the actual underlying data structure whatsoever. That's also how you end up with like the n+1 problem. If you're not just pulling one record and all of its children, but pulling a whole number of, tens of hundreds of thousands of records, you end up doing all those additional queries. Now, I don't believe that's entirely true. I think that it does compress those queries down. So sorry, not sure how to get to that query. Because this, I think, just has a, yeah. It would be great if I could expand that. I don't think this is not public, so I can't get to it. I can though if I'm in the debugger. So let's take a look at that then real quick. Web PHP. Fine, whatever. So it's with books, right? Let's refresh. Nope, need to add the xdebug in there. Oops. Okay. So we're going to skip to this line and take a look at the values. So eager load. Which is an eloquent builder. And if we then I'm gonna have to execute that. I guess if I do all, the reason I want to do that is I think it will act slightly differently. That's not even going to work. That needs to be get. Stop. Refresh. Oops. Okay. Yeah, we're now into this eager load relations, right? So this will have returned a collection of models. And then this For nested eager loads, we'll skip loading them here, and they will be set as an eager load on the query to retrieve the relation, so that they will be eager load on that query because that is where they get hydrated as models. Okay, that's fine. So let's go into here. Get relation. So that's ultimately going to call the books method. So relation is our has many. And then add eager constraints. It does the where in. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So what is this parent? What I want to know is if I generate a whole bunch of users and books, what does that query look like? I know I've seen it before. So yeah, book factory count 100. Create. Okay. So each one has its own user ID. So if we then go back to our browser and refresh, eager load relations here. Okay, so this is the bit that I think is interesting. So models is this 101 array. So if we do where in method, what is it going to do? So where in is where integer in raw. And then yeah, it's going to see how it gets keys. It's going to create one giant query. I should be able to this to raw SQL. Yeah. So user ID in. So it gets them all for all of them at once, which is probably as efficient as you can get to do a join without doing a join. It would be nice if that could optimize to a join. So yeah, ultimately we end up with two queries, right? And we could validate that if we wanted to, like we put in the debug bar or whatever. But yeah, ultimately there's our 101. Or 74, because that's where it cuts off for some reason. Okay. So each of the relations, so like has many, then determines how that query happens. So let's go here. We'll just minimize you. So each relation is its own class. So belongs to will flip the argument because it's the inverse. It's also where the actual creation of the relationship happens. So in a case of a belongs to, it will just set the attribute on it, right? But if you have a many to many, so belongs to many in here, then that has a pivot table involved, right? So I don't believe there is even an associate method. It's something else, right? Attach. And what that's going to do is actually create that pivot statement, that other query that gets created. So when you're persisting all of these, you need to persist the parent or the left side and the right side, and then create the pivot row. So you end up with three inserts essentially to have two records that are related to each other. All right. I'm gonna take a 30-second break. Give y'all a chance to ask any questions if you have any. There haven't been many yet, which means either I'm doing amazing or terribly, and you can never be sure which. And then we're going to go ahead and shut the stream down. So, yeah. All right, and we are back. So I guess at this point, I'm going to go ahead and go back to our doc here. So we did now look into all of these things. So Eloquent is complete. I'm going to call it complete. Obviously, that was not super deep, but I don't know how much deeper it's valuable going. Like knowing that, how Postgres does sequences versus MySQL, that doesn't really matter. Just knowing that the grammars are there and that that's how they work is important. What might be interesting is looking into the MySQL versus MariaDB stuff, just because most people see them as equivalent, and Laravel does a good job of hiding those differences. But it might be nice to know what they are. So what we didn't get to was migrations, which is totally fine. I'm going to move that one down. Because as I said, we're kind of getting into this grab bag now of stuff towards the end here. So this will be 12 and 13. Wow. So this one is going to be bus, right? And this becomes 10. So I think that's where we're at here. Is next week we will cover Blade. Oh, I've lost the markdown. That's an indented. Why is that not? Yeah, why is that? Okay. So we'll do Blade. We'll look at potentially the markdown stuff. I don't know if they're just using common mark or leak mark or something, whatever. But I'd like to know how that happens. And then we're going to kind of have this grab bag, I think, of migrations, bus, and validation. And validation, the reason that this came up last week as a potential topic, it sort of has a overlap with the request lifecycle, and the way that bears out. But obviously you can do validation manually and things like that as well. So I think that one will be quite interesting. All right. Um, that is all we have time for. Thank y'all for your time. It is always appreciated. If you have any feedback, please do reach out. You can see my socials. They'll pop up at the end of the stream. I'm also now on Blue Sky, just at davyshafik.com. So just at my domain. I should add that to the slides, but then I have to re-record them and whatever. So please do reach out. Would love feedback. We are starting to get close to the end here. My goal is to have these knocked out before the end of the year, which is a little tricky because according to my calendar, we have next Tuesday, which will be the 17th. And then the following Tuesday is Christmas Day. So that week we will not do a stream. So I'm going to either shift it to Monday or Wednesday. Probably Monday, because I suspect a lot of people will be taking Wednesday off. I know, obviously I'm British, so we would take Boxing Day off. So we'll probably do Monday instead of Tuesday, Christmas week. And then same thing. Actually, maybe not. I will probably do Wednesday for New Year's Eve week because maybe even Thursday. We'll have to figure it out. So things are going to get a little bit fluctuating. They're going to move a little bit around Tuesday after next week. But we do have 2 left to go. Actually, I guess that means so next week, and then just Monday before Christmas, and then we're all done. Unless other people have other suggestions, or these take longer than expected. So that's kind of where we're at. That's all we have time for. Again, thank you. Appreciate you. Please reach out with feedback. And I'm going to go ahead and shut things down.